Begin the Gemara today on the last line of Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis, where it says Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. The Gemara here is speaking about the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. That Rabbi Eliezer says that an androgynous has a halacha of a zachar, but the Gemara brought a raya from the halacha by Karbanis that even though he has a halacha like a zachar, but not 100%. Legabi Karbanis, a behemoth that's an androgynous, if it has to be a zachar, you can't be makdish this behemoth as a zachar. So the Gemara now will bring another raya to this halacha that an androgynous is not a full-fledged zachar. So we learned also in the Braise, Rabbi Eliezer said, Hakilayim, when you have an animal that's born from Klayim. So let's say, for example, you have an animal that's born from a lamb and a goat. So this animal is a hybrid. So this animal cannot be brought as a carbon. Or treifa, animal that's a treifa, can't live for 12 months. Or v'yaytze doifin, an animal that was born through a cesarean. Rashi here brings all the karbanis. Ki yivale, there's psukim that are mamayit, these type of animals from karbanis. Or a tumtum, or androgynous, an animal which is a tumtum or an androgynous. So loi kedoishin, they cannot be sanctified to be a carbon. And Rashi here says that not only it can't be sanctified to be as a carbon, but even through tmura. We just learned in last week's parsha, the halacha of tmura, that if you have one animal that's sanctified, and then the person says that he wants to exchange it with another animal, that's the halacha of tmura, and now the other animal becomes kaddish as well. So even through tmura, you can't be makdish any of these kinds of animals. So they're not shaykh b'chlal to kachim should take place on them. And then the Braisa adds, but also v'loi mekachin. And also they cannot cause anything else to become a tmura from them. So Rashi explains what this means. It just said that regarding any of these animals, they themselves can never become kaddish. So if they themselves can never become kaddish, so the Gemara asks in Bechairis, so then how is it possible that from this you're going to make something else a tmura? So Rashi says, b'negei to treifa and b'negei to yotze doifin, it's possible. If you were makdish an animal before it was a treifa, it was alive, it was a healthy animal, and then it became a treifa afterwards. So this animal became hektish. Afterwards, it became a treifa. Once it became a treifa, so then, if you're going to go ahead and want to make from this something else a tmura, it will not take effect. That's what mekacha means. From this animal, which is now a treifa, to bring over the kedusha to another animal, it won't take effect. And the same thing with yotze doifin. You makdish the animal, the fetus, before it was born, and then afterwards it was born through a cesarean. So now, after this, you can't be mekadesh something else through tmura. Shmuel, so the Gemara explains that Shmuel said, Loi kedoishin b'tmura, any of these kinds of animals, they cannot become kadosh, not even through tmura, and v'loi mekachin ba'isa tmura, or any of these animals themselves, if you're going to try to make from them another animal to be kadosh by tmura, by trying to exchange, which then makes the other animal tmura, it also cannot. Shmami no, so from here we see, one of the things that was mentioned here is androgynous. That from androgynous, the kedusha can't be chal, and you can't make a tmura of it. So what do you see? That an androgynous is not considered to be a regular zachar. If yes, then you would be able to make it kaddish, like any behemoth which is a zachar. Going back to the lashon of the Mishnah before, and Daf Pei Aleph, so it said there, Rabbi Eliezer Omer chayavin olav skila kezachar, that for an androgynous, the halacha of mishkav zachar applies, and you'll be chayiv skila like a regular zachar. Tanya, so we learned in a Braise, Omar Rebbe said, Kishalachti lilmud Torah etzel Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. When I went to learn Torah by Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, Chavru alai talmidov, so his talmidim sort of ganged up on me, Kitar negailim shal beis bukya, like these chickens in beis bukya. Rashi says, what were these chickens of beis bukya? They were bekiyim v'charifim. They were very, very smart, and they knew which are the chickens that belong in their chicken coop and which don't. And anyone that was a stranger, they would kick out. So they treated Rebbe in the same way. And they did not allow me to learn from Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua, ela davar echad b'mishnah seinu. Only one halacha that was taught over here in the Mishnah. And that is it. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, this halacha that Rabbi Eliezer said, that androgynous chayavin olav skila kezachar. That an androgynous, legabi this halacha is considered to be a zachar, and therefore will be chayiv skila 100% like a zachar. This is the halacha that Rebbe was zeicha to learn from Rabbi Eliezer ben Shamua. Hadron Allah ha'aral. This is conclusion of the Perek ha'aral, the 8th Perek of Masechta Yevamos. Hadran Alacha Aral, Hadran Alacha Aral. This is the end of the 8th Pedic. Okay, we begin a new Pedic, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, and over here in this Pedic it goes back to certain halachas that are negeya to the halachas of Yavam. Oh, you don't have the next chelik. Okay, so continue the next Pedic. Zok Heilige Mishnah. Here the Mishnah is going to tell you 4 different categories of women regarding whether they are allowed to be with their husband or the Yavam. Let's see. Yes, there's a case where mutaris lebaleyan, that these wives are allowed to be married to their husbands, but vasurun liyivmein, but they can't be with their Yavam. Then there's another case, the second case, mutaris liyivmein, the exact reverse. They are allowed to get married to the Yavam, but vasuris lebaleyan. They're not allowed to be married to their husband. Then there's a third scenario, mutaris le'elu le'elu. The case where this woman is allowed to be married to her husband and she's allowed to get married to the Yavam as well. And then the fourth scenario is Vasurais le'elu le'elu. Women that are asr to be married to their husband and also asr to their Yavam. And the Gemara will now go through all these 4 cases. And here the following are the cases of the women that are allowed to be married to their husband, but they're not allowed to be married to the Yavam, the brother of their husband, the Yavam. So the case is, there's a few cases here. One is Kohen Hedyet Shenasa Salmana, a Kohen Hedyet that married an Almana. So for him, this is allowed. He's a Kohen Hedyet. And for Yeshlei Ach, Kohen Gadol. And he has a brother that's a Kohen Gadol. So for the Kohen Gadol, the Almana is not allowed. So this is also for the Yavam. Rashi points out right away over here, and the Gemara will speak about this. It wasn't necessary l'chayre for the Mishnah to say that the case here is that the Kohen Hedyet married an Almana. Even if the Kohen Hedyet married a Basula, but after this Kohen Hedyet dies, so now she's an Almana. So it'll be also for the brother, the Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara will explain why the Mishnah chose to speak about an Almana. Another case that's mutter for the husband and also for the Yavam, Chalal Shanasa Ksheira. A Chalal that gets married to a woman that's kosher, a regular Bas Yisrael. So what happens in such a case? Once a Chalal marries a woman that's kosher, so Rashi here brings what we learned before in the Masechta, now this woman becomes a Chalala, and v'yeshloi ach kosher. And now he has a brother that's a kosher Kohen. He himself was a Chalal, so for him, he was allowed to marry this woman, and so it's mutter to him. But now for the brother, once he married her, she became a Chalala, so for the brother, it'll be Aser. Yisrael, a third case, Yisrael Shanasa Bas Yisrael. A Yid that marries a Bas Yisrael, a regular marriage, so she's mutter to him. But v'yeshle och mamzer. Now his brother, the Yavam, is a mamzer. If a mamzer is not allowed to get married into Klal Yisrael, can't marry this woman. Or another case, mamzer shemnasa mamzeres, a mamzer that marries a mamzeres, which is allowed. But v'yeshle och Yisrael. But he has a brother that's not a mamzer, and for the brother, this mamzeres is not allowed. So all these are the cases, mutara is lebaleyan, where this woman is mutter to her husband, but vasuris liyivmeyan. They're also to the Yavam, to the Yavam. Now the next scenario is ve'elo. The following other cases, mutaris liyivmeyan, that these are women that are allowed for the brother, for the Yavam, but vasuris lebaleyan. They're not allowed to be married to their husband. Kohen Gadol shekidish salmana. A Kohen Gadol that was mekadesh almana, so he's not allowed to be with her. So she's aser to him. Now Rashi points out that it says here in the Mishnah Dafka that it was Mekadesh Dalmana, but he didn't yet fully marry her. There was no Bia yet, because if there was, so then this woman would become a Chalala. We're trying to say cases over here where she's Asa to the husband, but Mutta to the Yavam. But if there was a Bia already, she would be Asa to the Yavam, even if the Yavam is only a Kohen Hedyet. So therefore it only says he was Mekadesh Dalmana. And Vayesh Layach Kohen Hedyet, so for the brother, the Kohen Hedyet, it'll be allowed. Another case, kosher shenasa chalala, a kosher, a kohen that's kosher that marries a chalala, so this is also for him. But v'yeshle ach halal, he has a brother, the Yavam is a halal, so for the brother she is allowed. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres, Yisrael that marries a mamzeres, so for this husband she's aser. But v'yeshle ach mamzer, the Yavam, the brother is a mamzer, so for him it is allowed. Mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael, a mamzer that marries bas Yisrael, so it's also aser for him. V'yeshle ach Yisrael, but his brother is a Yisrael. So these are all cases, mutara is liyivmeyan. These are women that are going to be mutter to the brother, the Yavam, but vasur is libaleyan. They're aser to be married to their husband. Elu asurais le'elu ule'elu. And the following are the cases where these women are going to be asur for the husband and for the brother, the yavam as well. Kohen gadol shenasas almana, a kohen gadol that marries an almana, ben v'yesh le'ach kohen gadol. And he also has a brother, kohen gadol. After this kohen gadol passes away, now they appointed the brother also to be a kohen gadol. So now the almana is asur to the husband and to the yavam as well. Oy kohen hedyet, or actually the Mishnah right away says, even if the brother is only a kohen hedyet, it would also be asur to the kohen hedyet, because now that the kohen gadol married an almana, he passled her. She becomes a chalala, and a kohen hedyet is not allowed to marry a chalala. Kosher shenasa chalala, a kosher, a kohen that's kosher that marries a chalala. And so now, once he marries a chalala, so she's asur to him, because he's a kosher kohen, and v'yesh le'ach kosher, and his brother, the yavam, was also a kosher kohen, so he's not allowed to marry this chalala as well. Yisrael shenasa mamzeres, a yid that marries a mamzeres is not allowed, and v'yesh le'ach Yisrael, and his brother is v'yesh le'ach Yisrael, he has a brother Yisrael, is also not allowed to marry this mamzeres. Mamzer shenasa bas Yisrael, a mamzer that marries a bas Yisrael, not allowed. V'yesh liach mamzer, his brother is also a mamzer that's not allowed to marry this bas Yisrael. So asurais le'elu ule'elu. These are all the cases where this woman is going to be forbidden for both the husband and for the yavam. The Mishnah concludes regarding the last thing that it said, that there are the women that are mutter for the husband and mutter for the yavam. B'shar kol hanoshim, all other noshim, the regular case of a marriage, of a husband and a wife, mutares lebalein ulevivmein. So this wife is mutter for the husband and for the yavam. So these are all cases, b'nigeya to Isurim de'iraisa, whether a Isur of, you have all these different scenarios of Isurim over here that are all minat Torah, so it's possible that it should be asur to the husband, asur to the yavam, asur to both, asur to only one. Now, similar you have regarding Shniyos Midivrei Seifrim, regarding those arayis that are not minat Torah, but are also only arayis that are asur midrabanan. So you have a case where this woman could be a Shniya Labal. She's only asur with this ervim midrabanan for the husband, but v'loy shniya liyavam. She's not a shniya. She's not asur midrabanan to the yavam. So Rashi says, for example, this woman is the mother's mother of the yavam, but she's not the mother's mother of the again. She's the mother's mother of the husband. That is, so she's asur to the husband, but she's not the mother's mother of the yavam. Let's say these two brothers are only paternal brothers. They share the same father, but they don't share the same mother. So she's the husband's mother's mother, but the brother, the yavam, she's not his mother's mother. So in such a case, this shniya will be asur to the husband, but mutter to the yavam. Or you could have the same. So this is asura lebal umuteres liyavam. Or you could have the same exact thing in the reverse. Shniya liyavam v'loy shniya lebal. It's the yavam's mother's mother, but it's not the husband's mother's mother. So it's mutter to the husband, but it's asura liyavam. So in such a case, it'll be asur to the yavam umuteres lebal, and it'll be mutter to the husband. Or you have a case where shniya lizeh or lizeh. You have a case where this woman is the mother's mother of both the husband and of the brother, the yavam. They share the same father and the same mother. So then, asura lezeh, she's asur to both of them. Now, benigeh to the case of a person that marries a woman which is only asur to midrabanan, shniyos midivrei seifrim. So the Mishnah here says different halachas benigeh to this woman. Ein law like ksubah. So first of all, this woman does not get a ksubah. And when it says that she has no ksubah, this means, first of all, the regular money of a ksubah, there's 200 zuz that you usually get for a ksubah. So this woman that's asur to marry him with the Rabbana, and she doesn't get that ksubah. And this also refers to the nichsei tzaim barzel. Remember, we learned before in the Masechta, you write into a woman when she gets married, she could write into the ksubah that there are certain properties or possessions that the husband takes responsibility that he's going to give back to her according to the value that it has today when he marries her. She doesn't get back. The husband does not take that responsibility. He doesn't have that responsibility to give it back to her. And v'loy peiris. Also, any peiris that the husband ate from nichsei melug. If you remember, we learned about nichsei melug. These are any properties that were not written into the ksubah that belong to the woman. And during the time of marriage, a husband eats from those peiris. But then, if he divorces her, he's going to have to pay her back those peiris that he ate. So over here, Rashi says she can't collect any of the peiris from him. Chachamim gave a knas because she's not supposed to be married to him. She can't take any of those peiris. And v'loy mezainis, he doesn't have to feed her. So Rashi explains that the chiddush over here is, if the husband's here in town together with her, so he's supposed to divorce her right away. She's asking the Rabbanah to be married to him. Needless to say that in such a case that he doesn't have to feed her. But what this means is, even if the husband went overseas and she went and she borrowed money from someone to feed herself, the husband's not going to be responsible to reimburse her for that. Because, this is all a knas for her, because she's not supposed to be married to him. And veloi balois. And also, if she brought in any clothing, and now there's leftovers from those clothing that usually she takes with her when she leaves, when he divorces her, over here in this case, Chachamim made a knas that she does not get that either. But the Mishnah says, va'avlat kosher. But from this marriage, even though it's asam d'Rabbanan, any child that's born is going to be totally kosher. It's isam d'Rabbanan, but the child born is kosher, and even kosher to marry a kohen. The kaifin oisei lahaitzi. We force the husband to divorce this wife, which is ervim d'Rabbanan. Another halacha the Mishnah says, almana l'kayin gadol, grusha v'chalutza l'kayin hedyet. So these are all cases which are of course asim and atayra. A kayin gadol is not allowed to marry an almana. Grusha v'chalutza ta kayin hedyet. Mamzeres and nesina li Yisrael. And mamzeres and a nesina is not allowed to marry Yisrael. So we learned in the previous perek about a nesina. If you remember, the nesina are those giv'oinim that came and were megayer in the times of Yeshua. We had a machlokes before. The Rishonim argue whether on nesina David HaMelech was geyser, that he shouldn't be allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. But Taistus, Rabbeinu Tam holds that it's also because of a lav, of leitis chatan, that any of the nations, of the 7 nations, are not allowed to marry into Klal Yisrael. And Bas Yisrael, Nasan or Mamzer, a Bas Yisrael is not allowed to get married to a Nasan or a Mamzer. However, Yesh, Lahen, Ksubeh. Regarding all of these cases, they will get the Ksubeh, which the Gemara will explain why that is. We're going back now to the first case of the Mishnah. Why does it say in the first case of the Mishnah that the first case was a kohen hedyet that married an almana, and he has a brother that's a kohen gadol? So that was the case where she's mutter to her husband, and she's aser to the yavam, which is a kohen gadol. So why did my area Tony Nosa? Why does the Mishnah say that he married her? Lisni kiddush. Why does it not say that he was mekadosh her? It's not necessary to say that he married her. So Taisus points out that really the basis of the Gemara's question is, why should the Mishnah dafka say Kiddush as opposed to Nasa? Because right afterwards, the Mishnah does say a case of Kiddush, and over there it has to say dafka Kiddush. So the Gemara wants to understand, why is it changing from afterwards where it says the term Kiddush? And if you'll say, the Nasa, there's a difference here. There's a difference between a kohen hedyet that marries this almana, or a kohen hedyet that was just mekadesh this almana. What's the difference? The reason why it says nasa, because now the havale esse v'lois esse. So now, if he has a brother which is a yavam, so for this brother which is the yavam and he's a kohen gadol, so now if the one that died married this almana, so now for the kohen gadol, which is the yavam, it'll be both an esse and a lois esse to do yibum for her. Why would it be a esse and a lois esse? The lois esse is he's not allowed to marry an almana, and the esse is that she's not a besula anymore. Kiyim besula, what's the lashon of the pasuk? Besula, besula ma'ama vikachisha. Yeah, so there's a isser of a esse here. And therefore, I would say as follows: the mitzvah of yibum, which is a mitzvah saseh, cannot come. V'dachi lois esse, and it can't push off over here. This lois esse. 1 second, I skipped something. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped something. I skipped a line over here. Again, the reason why it says the term nasa, the havale esse v'lois esse. So in such a case, the iser for the yavam, which is the kohen gadol, to do yibum for this woman, it's both a esse and a lois esse. So in such a case, the esse, the mitzvah of yibum, will not push off the esse and the lois esse. Vol kiddush, but if the brother that was married to her was only mekadesh her, but he wasn't boil her yet. So she's not a ba'ula yet. She's still a basula. She's an almana, but she's a basula. So then, maybe I would say, asi esse v'doiche lois esse. So the mitzvah of yibum should be doiche the lois esse. So that's why the Mishnah doesn't say such a case. So the Gemara says, but this halacha is not true. V'hakol pirke, and all of the Mishnayos that we just learned here of this Perek are a case of a esse v'lois esse, who it's a case of the mitzvah saseh of yibum, and the only reason that for the yavam he can't do the yibum is because there's a lois esse. All the other cases that the Mishnah mentions here, regarding a chalala, regarding a mamzeres, for all these cases, they're only a lois esse. And nevertheless, what's the halacha? V'loi asi esse v'dachi lois esse. The mitzvah of Yibum does not push off the lois esse that there is in this case. And Rashi brings, we learned this already a long time ago in the beginning of the Masechta. You learn from a pasuk va'alsa yivimtei ashara that the esse of Yibum is not doicha any lois esse, even though usually the klal is that esse is doicha lois esse. So b'kitzer, the Gemara's question remains. Over here, when it said the case is that he was naisa, that he was bayil, this almana, it's not necessary to say that. Because even if there was only a lav, there wouldn't be any mitzvah of yibum. So why does it say that he nasa? Why doesn't it just say that it was makadisher? And it's the Gemara, mishum de gabayil, misni seifer, because in the seifer, afterwards in the Mishnah, it says, kohen gadol shenasa as almana. Over there it says the case of a kohen gadol that married an almana. So over there it says dafke nasa. There it has to say that he married her. Why? The shavya chalala. Because there it's trying to point out that the case is that he made her into a chalala, and therefore she's asa not only to the husband, she's also asa to the brother, a kohen, because she became a chalala. So there it has to say nasa. Alva kiddush, if the kohen gadol was only mekadesh that almana, sharyale, she would be mutter to the brother because she did not become a chalala yet. So because there it said the case of nasa, so taninam reishi nasa. So in the reisha it also used the same term of nasa. That's the reason. Frakta Gemara, but this is not a good answer. Va'ad tani mishum sefer. You're telling me that in the reisha the Mishnah uses the term nasa because it has to use that term in the sefer. But listening mishum etziyasa. Why wouldn't it use the term kiddush in the reisha of the Mishnah because of the term kiddush that it uses in the middle case? What was the middle case of the Mishnah? Kohen gadol shekiddush es almana, a kohen gadol that was only mekadesh the almana, and v'yesh lo ach kohen hedyet, and he has a brother a kohen hedyet. So over there it has to use the term of kiddush. Why only the case of kiddush? Because if he already married her, he made her a halala, and she would be also to the brother a kohen hedyet as well. Over there it has to say kiddush. So if it has to say kiddush there, why in the reisha does it not say kiddush like it does in the middle case? Answers the Gemara, elo mishum baz buksa. The reason why in the reisha the Mishnah uses the term nasa is because of bas buksa. What does bas buksa mean? Look over here in these cases, right over here in this case itself that the Mishnah is speaking about. Not in the later cases of the Mishnah. Right here when it's talking about the category of those that are mutaris lebaleyan and asuris to the Yevamos, over here there's another case where it has to use the term nasa. The term bas buksa means like something that's in a narrow. When you have like in a narrow place, like right in the same place over here, it uses the term nasa. The kabayil lemisni. It says right over here, chalal shenasa ksheira, a chalal that married a ksheira. Time of the nasa. Over here, it has to say the term nasa. Why? Because the shavya chalala. Only when this chalal marries a ksheira, so because he was boiler, then she becomes a chalala. Avol kiddush, if he was only mekadisher, but he wasn't boiler yet, sharyale. So then she would be mutter to the yavam. So mishum hachi katani nasa. So therefore, just like in that case, it has to say nasa. So therefore, in the reisha as well, it says the term nasa. Now the Gemara has another shaila, like I mentioned. Rashi said in the Mishnah, "O my area the katani almana." Why does it say over here in this case that the kohen hedyet married an almana and it'll be mutter to him, but also to the brother the kohen gadol? Listen, besula could say the same thing that this kohen hedyet married a besula. And now what happens when he dies? She becomes an almana. It doesn't have to say that he married her already an almana. If you'll argue to say as follows, the Tana of this Mishnah holds, and this goes back to a concept that we learned earlier in the Masechta, Nisuin Harishainin Mapilim. The time of the Zika of Yibum, when does the Zika, the connection of this potential of Yibum begin? So if you remember earlier in the Masechta, we had a machlokes benegeh to the whole Zika of Yibum, whether that connection of Yibum begins when the husband dies, and now the connection to the brother begins, or the Zika of Yibum already begins by the marriage, when you get married. So now there's a Zika of Yibum to the brother. So maybe I say that the Tana of this Mishnah holds Nisuin Rishainim Apilim, that you have to go back to the time when the first brother got married. That's when it creates a Zika to the brother. And therefore, what am I going to say over here? If this kohen hedyet marries a besula, since it's at that time when he marries her, when the zika to the brother began, at this time she's still a besula. Before he was boiler, she's still a besula, so therefore there's going to be a zika to the brother, which is the kohen gadol. Later he died and she became an almana. That changed later, but we go back to the time of when he married her, and then she was still a besula. That's the svara the Gemara says. Taisus actually points out that this is a very difficult svara to understand because the Gemara never used this kind of svara before, lekula, to say, to be lenient, that even if later she becomes an almana, that the brother, the Kohen Gadol, should be able to marry her. The Gemara only brought this concept that the zika goes back to the nisuin or rishayim l'chumre, but not lekula. So Taisus over here says that the Gemara is going to ask another question on this svara, but really this whole concept to say that the zika goes back to the time when she was a basula by the first marriage is not really acceptable at all. Kopana, but the Gemara asks another question. You can't say that. Why not? Because there's another case that the Mishnah says. Harei cholol shenosok sheira, a kohen, which is a cholol that marries a woman that's kosher. So at the time, right in the beginning, when he was mekadesher, before he was boil her. So if you're going to say that it's at that moment when the zika begins to the brother, at that moment the zika to the brother was a good zika. She was not yet a chalala. And over there, we don't apply this concept and say that because he wasn't boiler yet and she's not a halala yet, that she's going to be mutter to the brother. So we see that we don't say that you go back to the nisuin or rishayim. So therefore, the question remains: why does the Mishnah over here say that this kohen hedyet married an almana? Why can't it say that he married a basula? So the Gemara answers, Havadai mishum seifa. Over here, definitely the only reason it says almana is because in the seifa it says almana. Mishum the kabayla misni seifa kohen gadol shenasas almana. In the seifa, the case is that the kohen gadol marries an almana. V'yeshli ach kohen gadol oy kohen hedyet, and he has a brother, a kohen gadol or a kohen hedyet. Dafka almana. Over there, the case is dafka and almana. That's what makes this woman into a halala, that she now can't marry the brother. Aval basula chazile. If the kohen gadol marries a basula, so then that's a perfect marriage. So she's mutter to the kohen gadol, and should be mutter to the brother as well. Because in the case of the sefer it says almana, so in the case of the reisha it also says an almana. Okay, so this is the conclusion of the explanation of the first case of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara is going to point out that the Mishnah over here said all kinds of cases, but it's missing. It's missing some other cases where you also could say the same thing. Again, the Mishnah went through cases where this woman is mutter to the husband, asa to the yavam, or the reverse, mutter to the yavam, asa to the husband, or asa to both, or mutter to both. The Gemara will point out that there are other cases that the Mishnah skipped. Maskef Rav Papa, so Rav Papa asked, and here the Gemara will bring the case of the Isser of the lav of marrying a Mitzri. A Mitzri, if you remember, we learned in the previous Pedic, you're not allowed to marry up until the third generation. Now, if we're going to pass in, if it's true what Rav Dimi said in the name of Rav Yechanan, that a Mitzri Shanasa, Mitzri Shenia that is, a Mitzri Shenia, second generation Mitzri, the father is a second generation Mitzri, Shanasa Mitzri Shena, and he married a woman, the wife is a first generation Mitzri. So what's the halacha of the son? You go after the father or after the mother? So Rab Dimi said in the name of Rav Yechanan, B'na Sheni, the son goes after the mother. Have it. The B'na Sheni have it. So now if so, listen, why shouldn't the Mishnah say the following thing? Now when it comes to the halacha of Yibum, the halacha of Yibum always applies to the brother of the father. So if so, you could have over here a case as follows. Listen, Nami, the Mishnah should say the case of a Mitzri Sheni Shenasa Shtei Mitzriyas. A Mitzri Sheni marries two wives and both of them are Mitzriyas. But the difference is, Achas Rishayna, one of whose wives are first generation Mitzri, and Va'achas Shniya, and the second wife of a Mitzris that he married is a second generation Mitzris. And V'hayoloi Banim Mirishayna Umishniya, and he had two sons, one from the wife that was a Rishayna and one from the wife which was a Mitzris Shniya. So these are two brothers that they share the same father. So the mitzvah of Yibum applies to them, even though they don't share the same mother. But now, what did Rabbi Yechanan say? That when it comes to the halacha of a Mitzri, the yichus of the Mitzri, you go after the mother. So what does that mean? One son is a third generation Mitzri. So if he's a third generation Mitzri, he's like a regular Yisrael, Rashi says. He can marry into Klal Yisrael, and Yisrael can marry him. The other one is a Mitzri Sheni. So he can't marry into Klal Yisrael. So now, the same, all the details that the Mishnah said will apply to this case as well. If each one got married as they should be, meaning that the one that's a Mitzri Shlishi got married to a regular Bas Yisrael, and the one that's a Mitzri Sheni got married to a Mitzris Sheni, so then Mutaris Lebaleyan. So these wives that they got married the way they should, so they're mutter to their husband, and vasuris liyivmein. But then to the brother would be aser. The one that got married, that was allowed to get married to Abbas Yisrael, but his brother is only a Mitzri Sheni, can't get married to the brother. And the Mitzri Sheni that got married to Mitzri Shniya can't get married to the Mitzri Shlishi, which is like a regular Yisrael. And v'i epuch, if they got married to the one that they were not supposed to get married to, v'nosov, and they got they got married to what they were not supposed to. So then mutares liyivmein. So then these wives would be mutter to the brother, but vasuris lebaleim. They would be also to the husband. And then you could also say a case of mutares le'elu. Who's a woman that would be mutter to both, to the husband and to the yavam, to the brother? In other words, whether the mitzri shlishi or the mitzri sheni, giyaris. A giyaris is allowed to marry a mitzri. We learned before that only kahal, leisavi bekal, you can't get married. But a giyaris, you are allowed to get married. So whether it's a mitzri sheni or a mitzri shlishi, if it's a giyaris, it would be mutter to both of them. And asura is le'elu, but then you have a case that would be asur to both. That's an islandess. If the brother, one of the brothers married an islandess, so this islandess is a Yisrael. So if the Mitzri Sheni got married to this islandess, she's a Yisrael, Yisraelis that is, she's not allowed to get married to this Mitzri Sheni, and then she also will not be allowed to get married to the brother, the Yavam, because there's no Yivim for an islandess. So that would be a case of Asuris Leilu. So what's the Gemara pointing out over here? Just like the Mishnah showed you all these different possibilities regarding the cases the Mishnah said, regarding the Isser of the Mitzri, the Mishnah should have mentioned this as well, that you have all these possibilities here as well. Why did the Mishnah not mention this? Answers the Gemara, Tana v'Shayer. The Tana over here that lists all these possibilities, it leaves over this case. Frag the Gemara, my Shayer, the high Shayer. What else did the Tana leave out along with this? The rule always is, the Tana, if it gives you a list, it's not going to leave out one case. As to if it leaves out at least two cases, then we could say the Tana left it out. What else did the Tana leave out? And for the Gemara, Shayer, Petzua Daka. The Mishnah could have said the same exact thing regarding the lav of a Petzua Daka, which is an individual that can't have any children. So the Mishnah could have said the exact same thing. And Rashi points out all the details. If the husband was a Petzua Daka, but his brother, the Yavam, was not a Petzua Daka, or in the reverse, if the Yavam was a Petzua Daka and the husband is not a Petzua Daka, or if both are a Petzua Daka, or if it's a Giyaris, and the Giyaris is allowed to marry a Petzua Daka, so it's mutter to both. So the same exact thing that it says in the Mishnah, it could say regarding Petzua Daka. So that's the other case that the Mishnah left out. Says the Gemara, no, that's not considered to be left out. Why not? Mishum Petzua Daka, lav shiur, that's not something that's left out. Why not? The Mishnah already said a case of a Chiyav Lav. So why would the Mishnah have to say Petzua Daka, which is just another example of a Chiyav Lav? Mitzri is not a Chiyav Lav. The case of Mitzri is only a Isser of an Essa. That's a new case that the Mishnah should have mentioned. But Chiyav Lav, why should the Mishnah have to say it? Frag the Gemara, wait a minute. Doesn't the Mishnah list a few cases of Chiyav Lav, even though it already says one Chiyav Lav, but the Mishnah lists a few cases of Chiyav Lav. So let it also say this case of Chiyav Lav of Petzua Daka. The Mishnah says, Kain Hedyet Shenasa Almana, that's one case of a Chiyav Lav, and then it says Chalal Shenasa Ksheira, and she becomes a Chalala, that's another case of a Chiyav Lav. So the Mishnah says two cases of Chiyav Lav over here. Answers the Gemara, no, over there's a reason why it says the case of Chalal Shenasa Ksheira. Why? Hahu Itzrichelei Lashminan Ked Rav Yudah Marav. Reason that's being said in the Mishnah is to teach me the halacha that Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav. Rav Yudah Marav. Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav, Lehuzaru Ksheirais Lihinose Lipsulin. That Koyanois, that are Ksheirais, so they are allowed to marry a Chalal, a Koyan that's possible. A Kohen, which is a kosher, not allowed to marry a Chalala. But the other way around, a Kehenes, which is a Ksheira, is allowed to marry a Kohen, which is a Chalal, that's possible. That's what the Mishnah is teaching when it says Chalal Shenasa Ksheira. So the Gemara is now teaching when it says Ksheira, doesn't only mean a Bas Yisrael, which is Ksheira to get married to the Klal Yisrael, but it means a Kehenes. It's coming to teach you this Chiddush that Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav, that a Kehenes, which is a Ksheira, is allowed to marry a Kohen, which is a Chalal, which is possible. So therefore there's a Chiddush in this case. So it's not Stam repeating two Lavim. But the Gemara continues, no, we see the Mishnah does repeat to another case of a lav. V'hakatani, the Mishnah says, Chalal shanasa ksheira. That's one case of a lav. But then it also says, V'yisrael shanasa bas Yisrael, and v'yeshlei ach mamzer. In the case of a mamzer, which is another lav. So why does it have to repeat another lav here? Answers the Gemara, Hanami loy mehad misna. This is also not considered to be repeating the same thing. Loy mehad misnahi. Why not? Because the Mishnah is saying two different types of lavin. There's a lav she'ein shava b'koil. First, it tells you the lav that's only by koyanim. That's not a lav that applies to all of Klal Yisrael. And then the kamashmal lav shava b'koil. Then it tells you the case of a lav of a mamzer that applies to all of Klal Yisrael. And over there it's telling you a chiddush that even a lav that applies to all the Klal Yisrael, but still there's a din of yibum over there. So it's another chiddush. But the Gemara goes further. What does it say afterwards in the Mishnah? Hakatani, but the Mishnah continues and says, Yisrael shanasa mamzeres v'yesh lo ach Yisrael. So that's another case of a lav. And then it also says, a mamzer shanasa mamzeres v'yesh lo ach Yisrael. Yet another case of a lav. So we see that the Mishnah does repeat various cases of lavin, even though they're the exact same thing. There's no chiddush. If so, the question remains, why did the Mishnah not say Petzu Adaka, which is another example of a lav? El lav shma mino, tana v'shayir shma mino. So this shows you that the Mishnah did not give you the full list, and therefore, the same thing has also been negated to the case of Mitzri, that it didn't give the full list. Gufe, now going back to this halacha itself, that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Omer Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Le'huzaru k'sheirais le'inasei l'psulin. The whole halacha of a kohen that is not allowed to marry women that are apostle to him is only benigayet to a kohen, but not benigayet to a nekeva. Kohenes, she's allowed to marry anybody that's apostle to kohenim. So going back to the point that we said before, we can prove this from our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? Chalal shenasa ksheira. That a chalal is allowed to marry a ksheira. What kind of a ksheira are we speaking about? My lav kohenes. Don't you think we're speaking about a kohenes? So it's saying here that this kohenes is allowed to marry someone that's apostle, a kohen that's apostle. Umay ksheira. What do you think? What does ksheira here in the Mishnah mean? Ksheira l'kona. That even this kohenes, my ksheira l'kohana, yeah, this kohenes. So she's ksheira to get married to a kosher kohen, and that's what it means. And the Mishnah is saying that she can get married to a kohen which is apostle. And says the Gemara, loy. It's b'chlal not talking about a Yisraelis. It's not talking about a Kehenes. It's talking about a Yisraelis. Or my ksheira. What does it mean when it said in the Mishnah the term ksheira? Ksheira l'kol. All it meant to say is it's calling her a ksheira that she's a kosher bas Yisrael that could get married into Klal Yisrael. That's what the term ksheira over here means. The Gemara, if that's what the term ksheira here means, if so, afterwards when it said yesh loy ach kosher, that this chalal has a brother which is kosher. So what does the term kosher over here mean? So before, when we learned the Mishnah, we taish, what this means is, he's a chalal, but his brother is a kohen, which is kosher. But now, if you're saying, when it said before ksheira, ksheira means ksheira l'kahal. So over here, when it says yesh ach kosher nami kosher l'kahal, does that mean also that it's not talking about a kohen which is kosher? It means a kosher to get married into Klal Yisrael. Meklal. So does that mean the who pasal l'kahal, that the husband himself is pasal to get married l'kahal? That can't be, because the whole point that the Mishnah over here said was that it's talking about a kohen that he's a chalal, but he's allowed to get married to this bas Yisrael. It can't be talking about a kohen that's pasal l'kahal. Again, the case of the Mishnah that I was speaking about over here was those that are mutares l'balein. And a chalal shenasa ksheira is one of the cases that are mutares l'balein. But if the taich of the case of chalal, again, if the taich of kosher l'kahal means that the husband was pasal l'kahal, so how could you say that it's mutter to the husband? Elolav kohen. So when it says kosher, it means kosher as a kohen. Umeduhu kohen, he kohenes. So just like when it says regarding him the term kosher, it means him as a kohen. So too when it says ksheira, it means that she's a kohenes. So therefore this proves what Rav Yehuda Amar Rav said, that a kohenes is allowed to marry a chalal. So the Gemara doesn't accept this. Midi area, could you compare these two expressions? Hakadise and v'hakadise. Each, the term ksheira that it says is speaking about a Yisraelis, and that she's kosher l'kahal, and the term kosher that it says regarding the kohen is speaking about a kohen that's kosher to kohen, but not kosher to Klal Yisrael. Masav Ravim bar Nachman asked the question. It says in the pasuk, lo yikachu, lo yikachu. If you see over here on the side, the pasuk, Rashi brings it says twice the term lo yikachu. Isha zayna v'chalala lo yikachu, regarding a kohen, that he's not allowed to marry a zayna and chalala. Then it says again, v'isha grusha me'isha lo yikachu. Why does the Torah write twice lo yikachu? Melamed sha'isha muzheres al yidei ha'ish. This teaches us that a woman, that the Isha, she's warned also through the Ish. What does through the Ish mean? So right now, the Gemara understands what this means is, just like a Kohen is not allowed to marry to any of those psulim, that it says, like a Zayna, a Halala, a Grusha, the same thing is regarding a Isha, a Kohenes, that a Kohenes is also not allowed to marry any of those psulim. So therefore, this is a question on what Rav said, that the Kohenes is allowed to marry psulim. Rav answers, no, that's not what it means. What it means is, kol heicha dehu muzar, any time when he's getting married to a zayna, chalala, a gerusha, and therefore it's an isser for him, so he muzheres. So she's being over on isser as well. That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about a kehenes to go and get married any of these women. What it's saying is, when he's being over the isser, so it's an isser for her as well. Sorry, this is the conclusion of this halacha again. If he's being over an iser, he muzheres. She's being over an iser as well. But in a case where he's not being over an iser, for example, he's a chalal and she's a kehenes, and a kehenes is allowed to marry a chalal, so hulay mizara, so it's not an iser for him either. Do you learn that out from this double lashon of lo yikachu, that when he's being over an isser, it's an isser for her as well? We learned this out from another thing that Rav Yudah Marav already said. And this is Bechlal, you find Benegeh to all these surim in the Torah that a man and a woman are the same. Rav Yudah Marav, Ish, Isha, Kiyasu mikol chatois adam, a man or a woman that do any aveda, hishva kosov, isha leish, l'chal leinshish b'Torah. When it comes to any yisurim, any lavim in the Torah, a man and a woman are the same. The only thing that a man and a woman are not the same is v'negei ta mitzvah sasei shazman grama. Otherwise, the isser of a man and a woman are the same. So I learned that out already from there. So the same thing applies over here. If a kohen is marrying a woman which is a zayna, a chalalas, if it's an isser for him, it's an isser for her as well. So why do I need a special riboy of lo yikachu to teach this to me? Answers the Gemara, if I would learn out from this that I find always that a man and a woman are the same, havamina, I would say that's lav ashava bakoil. Regarding a regular lav that applies to all the Klal Yisrael, there I say that a man and a woman are the same. Avalav she'ein shava bakoil. Maybe over here regarding this unique lav that's only for a kohen, maybe I should say loy. Maybe this does not apply to a woman as well. So I need a special riboy of lo yikachu to say that here as well it applies to a woman. Let's finish the inyan. So the Gemara continues, Vaharei tumah. When it comes to the halacha of a kohen that's not allowed to be metameh to someone. The lav shein shava b'koil. So this is a lav that's only by kohenim. It's not equal. Doesn't apply to all the Klal Yisrael. And over there, I see that it applies to a woman as well, because v'taim the cost of rachmana b'nei aren. The only reason that I say that a woman is excluded from this is because the Torah says the lashon of b'nei aren, that this isser only applies to b'nei aren, v'loy b'nei aren. So it doesn't apply to a woman. Holav hachi. If I would not have this pasuk of v'loy b'nei aren, hava minute, so then I would say nashim chayim, that the Isser applies equally to a woman. My time, why would I say that it applies equally to a woman? Lav mishum that Rav Yudah Marav. Isn't it because this drasha that Rav Yudah learned from Rav, isha ki yas mikol chates adam, that a man and a woman are the same for everything? Even over here, for this lav that's not shava b'koil, even for this lav that's only by a kohen, I learned from here that a man and a woman are equal. So the question still remains, why do I need the special drasha of twice, lo yikachu, to teach me that a man and a woman are the same? Answers the Gemara, loy, the gamrinon lo yikachu. The only reason why I say over here, b'negei to the lav of tumah, that they are the same, is taka because I have this double lashon of lo yikachu. That is the source to say that they are the same. Ikedamri, there's another version, others say that actually it's the other way around. That kiche itzrechele, you know why the Torah has to say a double lashon to teach me that the isser that there is for the kohen to marry those women that are asa to her apply to the woman as well. Itzrechele, I need that because salkedaita chamine ligma mitome. Maybe I would think, learn out from what it says here by Tumah. By Tumah, the Torah said, B'nei Arayin v'loi b'nei Sarin. So regarding the halacha of a Kayin by Tumah, it made a distinction between a man and a woman. So maybe I should make that distinction and negate to those people that a Kayin is not allowed to marry, that it doesn't apply to a woman. Kamash Malan, that's why I need the extra lashon of lo yikachu to say that it does not apply to a woman.